start moving swiftly on, we have two very special guests. We have a special host for this panel. Please give it up for the one, the only, the legend. It is Mr. Jack Lawrence.
Yeah, I mean, that's it, that's you done. I'm the host. I don't know how this is going to go. Let's all just have fun. And I'm hosting my very, very dear friend. You know what the panel's about, you've seen it. It's about the Lost Pilots. It's about the stories that didn't make the cut for the books. I think it's interesting. He's touched on things in panels before. This is dedicated to that. So please welcome to the stage my very dear friend James Roberts. So yeah, intentionally it's going to be informal, with any creative endeavour, obviously there's a lot of stuff that gets written or designed and doesn't make the cut. So James, how much didn't get? How much would there have been that didn't make the cut, and why didn't there?
Firstly, I like you interviewing. This is good. This is good. You're doing it. You're proper interviewing.
Yeah, I didn't know this was happening.
So, as we will discover, so there's a bit of structure to this. I've got a little PowerPoint thing to do. It was near the end that we had to compress things, and so there's more stuff kind of got omitted or altered near the end. But having said that, even from the start, you know, I had a year's run-up before Modern Meets the Eye launched, in which, as some of you will know, I kind of put out all the ideas, all the things worthy of consideration, and even at that early stage, some things got waylaid or dropped, or the other category was, oh yeah, I still like it, I'll get back to it, but for whatever reason, other events overtake and we don't. So yeah, so there's various reasons why. And also, sometimes you think, well, that's a really good idea, and then you revisit it, and you just think that's not going to work.
I think I'm right in saying that there was a lot of stuff that had to be cut just because the series was cut short, and that we had larger plans that led to. I don't know. Do you feel that last season, the one with Lost Light that I was on, do you feel that was truncated, and could have just done with a bit more kind of dreaming room?
Yeah, it was, I suppose, a bit of a mixed blessing. Not many people know is that I have had, Modern Meets the Eye had been relaunched for Lost Light, and Jack joined us as the new kind of resident artist. And already by that point, the stories had been structured as seasons. So, season 1 culminated in Remaining Light, season 2, after Dark Side of Tron, season 2 ended with The Dying of the Light. And then had Lost Light not come into itself as a separate title, we would have carried on, and my intention was season 3 would probably end with issue 75 in the sort of the grand American comic tradition, and then there would have been a final season to take us to issue 100, Modern Meets the Eye. So that was in my head, the plan, and that was absent of any editorial intervention. That was me just kind of blindly assuming we'd just keep on going, wrap up with 100, and I guess that speaks to a slowly dawning realisation that it can't go on forever, and if I try to make it go on forever, I think the quality will dip. Some might say that it did, but anyway, I think right, 4 seasons and wrap up with 100, because that's really rare for any comic to have got to triple figures, much less a toy title. So that was the plan. We just kind of changed lanes to Lost Light. The plan was still 2 more seasons, maybe wrapped with issue 50, and then I was writing issue 12, and the news came that there was going to be like a line-wide reboot, new continuity, 12 issues to wrap it up. That's where the truncation came in. That's where there were some difficult decisions to be made about what to keep, what to jettison. I'll talk about that when we get to the end. Shall I start on the...
Yeah, please do.
Yeah, I'll start.
Wow, sorry.
Oh, there we go. It's a nice logo, isn't it? It's a nice logo. Lost Light logo. Right. Okay. So I've tried to do this chronologically. So we're starting at pre-issue 1, when I was having to put together the crew, and Robots in Disguise was launching at the same time. John Barber was writer, and so there was some kind of horse trading going on as to who was going to get what characters. Most of the G1 characters were alive, and some hadn't been used. The number that hadn't ever been used in the IDW continuity shrank as time went on, as you'd expect. But at that stage, 2011 actually, beginning of 2011, we kind of had a lot of choices. I don't know who, I probably jumped in there first as an excited kind of fan and said, oh, I'll pick them and them. The character that didn't make the cut, or one of several, I'll mention the others, but Power Glide was going to be on the crew, and he was going to be Tailgate, so in lieu of Tailgate there was going to be Power Glide, and the reason was, and this was quite the kind of mechanical stage of putting the kind of the plot together, building your characters, building your archetypes, and I wanted somebody which within IDW didn't have any baggage, didn't have any backstory, could also be something of a kind of ingenue, a bit of a naive character, an audience surrogate. Now, the way in which Tailgate was incapacitated for several million years wouldn't necessarily have worked with Power Glide because he's got an automotive and can fly. So I don't know how I would have taken Power Glide off the board for the necessary length of time and resurrected him, but I ruined that idea myself because when Mike Costa and I were co-plotting Chaos, Mike said, oh, I need lots of Autobot flyers for a particular scene, you know, who's out there? And I just reflexively said, oh, blah, 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 and I put Power Glide on the list and he used him, so I couldn't. And that was an example of, you know, Tailgate is better, as you know, better to perform the role when I needed somebody to fill. Also, Wheeljack was going to be on the crew, potentially in lieu of Brainstorm. I mean, they're kind of broadly, they perform similar functions. But actually, John was a big fan of Wheeljack, so he had him first. Blitzwing was going to be the Decepticon in lieu of Cyclonus. Because then I had a connection to Blitzwing, he was my first toy. And then
I think Tailgate is not the only one that I think is a bit of fit. One of the things that I constantly hear from people is that you took characters that really very little had been done with, and I don't brainstorm way more than Tailgate, but take these characters that Tailgate especially had nothing had ever been done, and you made these characters that we just completely fell in love with. And Power Glide did come with baggage, you know, albeit the cartoon or whatever. So he was formed in people's minds, whereas Tailgate wasn't. And I think that is a lot of that is why that's a better fit, because they're a blank slate for you to do, you know, what you did with them.
that's a very good point, actually, yeah, because certainly American fans, you know, that grew up with the cartoon, perhaps in the way British fans did, and they would have, the girl of Power Glide is, you know, would have been foremost in people's minds. So yeah. And blank slates were important, not for every character, but for the reasons you said, you know, it was, them not having a prehistory, if you like, was beneficial. Yeah, so had Wheeljack made the cut, one of the stories in season 1 that I didn't get around to telling involved Wheeljack. It was in issues 4 and 5. We had the trip to Delphi. And the idea in the early stages of More Than Meets the Eye was to kind of make it episodic and to explore what was then a new crew, having little diversionary, you know, relatively self-contained stories like Star Trek or something like that, to get under the skin of the characters. And the working title of the story was simply The Hand. It was a placeholder, and it was going to involve Wheeljack and somebody else. It may have been Ratchet, but they were going to. It would have been a trip to an alien a planet which had been affected by the war, and if this sounds sketchy, it is, because I never got around to writing it, but it would have explored the ship of Theseus type thing. So if you're a transformer and you can replace every part of your body, at what point do you cease to be, you know, the authentic original? And I think we would have discovered at the end of or through the course of the story that the only part of Wheeljack that was pure Wheeljack was one of his hands, because everything else had been replaced with everything. Because that was the hand. I've got to pretentious chapter title. So yeah, Unmurdered. So when we started Modern ECI, forgive me if you've heard this before, IDW didn't know if it was going to be a success or not. Same as where it was in Disguise. They said 12 issues maybe. That got bumped up to 15, and then sales come in, reaction comes in, and we know we've got like a season in my terminology. So I planned out the season, was able to expand it a little bit as we were getting more issues. So the Shadow Play storyline was not part of the original season 1. That was inserted because Hasbro, little history here, Megatron and Optimus Prime have been taken off the board at the beginning of this phase of IDW continuity to shift focus onto other characters. And then Hasbro, I guess, kind of panicked a bit and thought, well, they are pretty iconic. Could we kind of have them in a bit? So John Barber told the story of present-day Optimus Prime in his book, and we used this flashback device to the pre-war era to revisit the Orion packs from Chaos Theory. Anyway, so we inserted those stories, and it meant that season 1 became about 21, 22 issues. But the bulk of that story had been written at the outset, and my point is that originally, as you can tell, Tailgate was going to meet his end at the end of Remain in Light, so he wasn't going to survive Cybercrisis. And World was also going to be murdered. There's that scene where Cyclonus appears to push him into essentially the Swanton Pool, the Lunar 1 death pit, and he doesn't. So there's two characters that outlived, happily, from my perspective, outlived their allotted lifespan, and I wish I could weave some pretentious writerly justification beyond, I really liked writing them and I didn't want them to die. So that's...
I think that's, surely everyone would agree that is only to the good, because those two characters, more than a lot of the characters in it, are so beloved, and what their love for has kind of come after that point, not those points. So good car.
Yeah, and it's, well, I'm trying to think actually, can anybody tell me, does anyone die in Remain of Light? I know Diatlus, is there any, I don't think there's any main cast member that meets their end in, we've off pipes by that point, but no, I think it's relatively body count light relative to other finales. And that goes back to my earlier point about paths not taken. So when I sat down to write the longer term kind of spine to the series, and Tailgate and Whirl came off the board at the end of season 1. So having them still around, you then need to think of new plots for them, which you wouldn't have otherwise. What's in the parks? That's an Admin Joe reference, which I got to now explain. Admin Joe is an ancient TV show. And what's this from the end of 7? Anyway, arguably irrelevant to what I'm going to say. So one of the mysteries in season 1 that was going to be resolved at the end of season 1 in Remain in Light was the contents of Brainstorm's briefcase. And well, that's helpful. I can see the screens in front of me there. Thank you. Yeah. So what was going to happen was that in the final part of Remain in Light, when there's a lot going on, the legislators are storming Tyrest's base, and you've got the portal the apparent portal to Cyber Utopia. Lots of stuff going on, and in amidst that fight, in classic kind of action movie style, Brainstorm was going to be separated from this precious item that was going to kind of skid across the floor to a point, to an area where Tailgate and Swerve are cowering. Now, looking in that briefcase is not in at the forefront of Tailgate's mind, who's dying, and is either going to die of terminal illness or isn't killed. But Swerve, being rewired a bit differently, is like, well, let's look in the box, because the damage sustained had, you can tell it's openable. And they opened the box. This was written, I wrote this scene, and how it plays out is exactly as it played out in Slaughterhouse, in that you've got a page of non-chronological panels. Right? And two things. One, there's already a lot going on in that issue. And if you're suddenly hit with, like, kind of like an experimental page, which doesn't make much sense. And also the benefit of delaying it and doing it in slaughterhouse was that I was able to think, okay, well, if they're in a lift, you've got visual clues that in the order in which you didn't have that in this legislator. So that was a problem. I wrote it anyway. The issue ran to more than 21 pages, and I did that thing which you soon discover you should never do. And then you say to John in this case, you say, look, I know it's overrun, but is there any way we can make this? It's the finale, a few extra pages, and I won't charge for my pages. You know it's going to be a non-starter because you can't expect the artist to do it for free or the colorist. Anyway, so it didn't happen. That bit got cut out, and it was the right thing to do. It was too busy. Yeah. What a lovely. I mean, that's a lot of lubricant, isn't it? That's arguably more lubricant than you'd expect to find. But if you bisect somebody, that's what happens. So poor Ambulance. He was never going to come back. I mean, that's as definitive a demise as you're going to get. But in season 2, there was going to be a lot more. The effects of his death were going to play into the story more, particularly with First Aid was going to be severely affected by the violent death of Ambulance, and was going to kind of spiral over the course of several issues. In a way, which wouldn't have been immediately apparent to readers, but you'd have, in hindsight, you'd have reread it and seen there was indications of kind of a mental collapse is too strong a word. He was going to become increasingly obsessed with trying to resurrect Ambulance. So we'd have learned that he'd have recovered the body, he'd have stitched it back together. He was stowing it, as I recall, under the floor of the Medilab. Not sure why, but yeah, it was concealed basically, but in every sense of the word. He knew he shouldn't have been doing it. And there was, and this was sketchy, but there was also plans he would have gone on a quest to find the other members of the combining team of which Ambulance formed a part. And his plan was, if they can combine, and there's a kind of gestalt mental melding, is there not some imprint of Ambulance consciousness in the others that he could kind of, a bit like the spark, some of the lug spark cloud resurrection, I guess. So yeah, that was going to be. Like I said, I don't think it would have been cheap to bring him back, but it was more about actually First Aid needing some focus in season 2, and actually I can't remember how it would have come out, but the discovery. There would have been some way in which he violated some medical ethics by doing this, and that would have persuaded Ratchet not to promote him to chief medical officer. Right, somebody on Twitter said to me, they said #justice for quick switch when they heard about this panel. And so I know I've alluded to quick switch before. Am I talking too much?
No, not at all. I don't think everyone he's not talking too much, right? I mean, what else are you going to do?
Murmur of agreement. No, I'm conscious that I'm just talking. Carry on.
I'm literally here to facilitate.
You're interested? Yeah. Well, yeah, so going right back to the start, right back to the beginning when I was mapping out the overall storyline, the whole thing about Overlord. And I went through some really early notes the other day, and I'd written about, there's a secret attachment to the ship, it's like a basement, and I hadn't at that point worked out what was going to be in it. So it was Overlord was one option. I think maybe super fated scraplet was going to be another one. So like just a single scraplet that was the most kind of hyper-virulent, dangerous plague. I don't know what it would Prowler have been involved somehow, but like a weapon of mass destruction, but in the form of like a bolt or something. Anyway, so Overlord was going to be down there. It was all part, as you recall, of Prowl's master plan to create an Autobot Phase 6er. And Quickswitch is was one of the very few characters. I don't even know if he appeared in IDW1 at all.
I don't think so.
No, he may have been on that list, that
He was in Transformers vs. Visionaries. He got killed off.
Ah, okay.
It's a high and die appearance.
Okay, so him and Cutman. So yeah, the plan was he was going to be the culmination of Prowl's plan. So they would have, they would have used Chrome Dome would have discovered through a memory probe, the way in which 6 changes are created. They would have gathered the enuntrium they need to code, a protoform. And the quick switch would have been the result, but then it would have turned out the quick switch has no intention of fighting at all. So that was going to be the kind of, that wasn't the end of it, but that was the kind of twist at that point. Despite Prowl's 7D chess and things, and all the death and pain that had led to the creation of the first Autobot Phase 6er, the message is, well, you can't dictate what someone's personality is like. Just because they're built to fight doesn't mean they want to fight. So that was going to be the thing. And it was just one of those stories in a season 2 which was never intended to have Megatron in it, but then did. And Megatron is, as I've said before, it's like a black hole, narratively speaking, in a good way. But everything kind of bends towards Megatron when you've got someone like him on board. And we just didn't have space for another mystery. Season 2 is it's just boxes within boxes, because we've got time travel. And we're telling the origin of Megatron, that kind of despot, non-chronologically. There's a lot going on. The remnants of the quick switch plot, the Echo, I think the last Echo, is in a text story in issue 13. And issue 13, not issue 13, there was one in 13, but it's in issue 21, it's the last part of Remaining Light, and then we're going more or less straight into Dark Cybertron, so there were some loose ends. Not expecting Dark Cybertron, really. There was a need to cover some plot points off in the text story. And I think in there is reference to basically metal being collected by Swerve surreptitiously, and that would have fed into the creation of, because you need enuntrium to make a Phase 6er. So yeah, that's the kind of the last vestige of that dropped plot. Okay, right, so yeah, this is a big one. That's a quantum leap reference, for those of you under my age. There's a whole thing around Chrome Dome and Rewind, and I'll try and condense it. Some of this is out there already. But you've got Rewind, who is killed by Chrome Dome blowing up the slow cell. And an Overlord survives, and we see his body floating in space, and then a few months later, 15 issues later, we have the new Rewind, the sole survivor of the quantum duplicate ship. And in my head, and in my notes, there's Rewind Mark 1 and Rewind Mark 2. And the plan was that the original Rewind, Mark 1, he had survived, and he was going to come back into the series in Season 3, late in Season 3 potentially, and there would have been an agonising storyline where only one of the two could survive, because you've got the duplicate problem, quantum duplicate problem. Proximity equals deletion for one of you. And both Chrome Dome, but importantly the readers themselves, would have to choose, in effect, which do you want to survive. So you'd have had the original that you hopefully learned to love over a couple of years, but in the intervening time you've had Mark 2, which you've also come to feel affection toward. So that was the kind of emotional arc. In terms of plot points, what would have happened is, if you look at the panel with Overlord in space, his fist is clenched. He would have been holding Rewind Mark 1 in his USB stick form. Rewind, famously didn't have a decent alt mode, didn't see him transform, and when he did, it was like a ridiculously oversized USB stick, memory stick. So this would have been, he would have, in the panic, at the minute of death in the cell, he would have transformed, shrunk, been held, survived in the enuntrium fist. And then the Black Box Consortia would have found his body, and they would have, I'm going to condense this because I'm conscious of the time, they would have basically turned him into a weapon. They would have, now when I say it out loud, at speed, it sounds ridiculous, okay? Maybe it was, but trust me, we could have made it work. They would have created a kind of, they would have made him look like Primus. They would have preyed on the Cybertronians' kind of mythology, and this, because bear in mind, Primus was a warrior figure, so they've given him like this Magnus-style armour. Rewind would look like Primus, and he would have kind of universe hopped. It was an accident. He would have flung like however many parallel universes down the line, and he would have to get back to our universe. He had to jump. A bit like Quantum Leap, hence the quote. The only way to do that was through an intense injection of power. The only way to find that power was through matrices. So he was basically going through time and space, harvesting matrices to get it a step closer to his universe. And this legend kind of would have built up around him, and it would have culminated in, so Dissolution, the first arc of Lost Light, there was going to be an interlude in there, or an epilogue really, where, bearing in mind we'd spent some time in this parallel universe, and Primus, quote unquote, would have appeared and fought oh god, I don't know which one it was, but one of the 12, and killed it, and used the Matrix to jump again. And you'd have been left thinking, well, Primus is making his way towards our universe and building up to a big fight. So that was dropped because Dissolution was already long. It was going to be a 6-parter, it became a 7-parter. I don't think many people have drawn 7 consecutive issues of a Transformers film.
No one has. No one's done it and got it out in the month that it was supposed to come out.
Right, yeah.
But it doesn't say that on the wiki, and I think it's about time. Yes, right.
With no drop in quality.
No, apart from, well, issue 7 was, because I was told, I'm doing the first 6 issues, and then the script for issue 7 turned up, and I emailed Carlos to say, is this meant for me? He said, yeah, but I'm going on holiday. So that's why it's inked by someone else, issue 7, and I was really unhappy with the result, and I said to IDW, I never want to be inked again, don't put me in that position again. So for me, there is a dip in quality, but obviously not to you, don't care what it looks like anyway, it's just all about your mighty words.
Well, let's take a pleasant diversion, because Dissolution was the first time we worked together professionally.
Yes.
And it was the idea with that was to start, the pattern so far with seasons had been, start with a kind of a bit of a bang, mild bang, but build up and have a big finale. I wanted to start season 3 with a finale. So, we end up, and the Functionist universe gave us that kind of sandpit to play in. You couldn't do those kind of big, bold, kind of like an action-oriented story too much with our own cast in our own universe, because, for obvious reasons. But yeah, we could have fun, and so it culminates in you run Punch in the Moon, and you rendered it spectacularly. But yeah, the Dissolution was going to be like, let's do a finale at the beginning, and then build through for season 3. So I took out the scene with, which would, and again, this is good. This is all good, because it wasn't a great idea, okay? And it was right that it came out. Both the Primus thing, but also Rewind Mark 2. That's, of all the things that didn't happen, that's the best thing that didn't happen, I think. Yeah. Because it just was, it would have been manipulative, it would have been a bit cheap.
I think that may have caused some bad feeling with the audience, personally.
Yeah.
I think we all would have suffered a bit for that.
Yeah. So you're welcome, everybody. But how close it came to happening was when I was writing issue 12 of Lost Light, when the call came, as I say, to you've got 13 issues to wrap it up, and I had already written an interlude, 5-page interlude, where we cut, of all places, to Marvel UK's continuity in the middle of Target 2006, which most of you guys will know, a famous British story. And in that story, it's about Galvatron coming back in time, and they throw everything they've got at him, except for Omega Supreme, who is conspicuously absent. And they even lampshade it in the story. They say, why not use him? And then we don't hear from him again. So it would have been Rewind / Primus versus Omega Supreme, like a hitherto unseen part of 2006, a dovetailing of that story and mine. And he would have, incapacitated Omega, somehow got the energy he needed to jump, and the next jump would have taken him into our universe, you see. So it was written, and then I had to decide, now I know I've only got 13 issues left, am I going to have time for this to play out as intended? Well, evidently not, but it took me a surprising amount of time to really accept that. So that came out. It was replaced by an interview with the Scavengers instead, which Andrew Griffith drew, and that was when this particular line was properly dead. And the only other remnant of this plot line is way back in issue 12 when Rewind is comatose and Chrome Dome simply makes a confession to him about the real reason they met, and it was Crown was involved, and it was trying to find out where Minimus Ambus is, and this was the other element of Mark 1 versus Mark 2 Rewind's story, which was going to be tied into the big thing about which one of them survives, and all these revelations have come out, because the idea is that Rewind, although comatose, would have recorded Chrome Dome confessing, but would only have accessed that memory while he was kind of floating through space and everything. That all went. And like I said, it was too much. So yeah, best gone. Right. There's a lot going on in that picture, isn't there? Yeah, my MPreg agenda. In that context, squeeze is a strange choice. What that means there is kind of compressed. So the idea in season 3 was that the Scavengers were going to have their own proper, they were going to have their own season finale. So we'd made the joke in season 2, all these unseen adventures that the Scavengers were having. And that was always a nice conceit, that there was like an unpublished sister title that was just about them. And it's amazing that the gap, the time that elapsed between the first Scavenger story in Morning at Sea in 6 and 7 and 8, and then I think it was mid-40s when we returned to them. And they were popular, they were like, they always got a good reaction, and it was just trying to dedicate the time to go back and see them. So, season 3, the idea had been to do a 5-parter, which was just about them, and it's like their own. Imagine they had a series, this was their finale. And what we got in the 2-parter in season 3 is kind of a squeezed version of that story. So, the interview I mentioned in issue 12, when Nickel is brought into their orbit, that would have formed the beginning of this 5-parter. It would have breathed a lot more. It still would have been about Troja Minor, and it still would have involved Scorponok, and we'd have learned about the Firstborn and so on, but it would have been over 5 issues. There would have been more of a kind of Last Stand feel to it. There was a scene always in my head which I didn't build on in the end, but it would have been kind of a sky platform with the Scavengers on, and maybe the Firstborn and Grimlock, of course, and they would have been surrounded by either Scorponok's hordes or the Black Block's consortium, but it really would have been a classic kind of against the odds thing. One of them would have been killed off in that. And so that had to be sacrificed. And I do regret that we didn't get 5 issues to do a full throttle Scavenger story.
I regret that. I think that there's a lot that I feel it was truncated because I'd just come on. I'd been aiming to be on Transformers comic, for my entire career, without actually doing anything about it. And then I finally hit by a series of events. I got on to Transformers, and then was invited to TF.Nation, having done I think maybe the first 5 or 6 issues. I think that first arc was done, and so it was my first Transformers con as a guest, and I was on this book that I loved, and we met on the very first day, and we got coffee, and they said, let's go and have a meeting in the room, with some privacy about this, and I was so excited, we were going to talk about plot and stuff. We got up there and said it's ending. The con hasn't even started yet. I didn't know that I was going to then go on and do loads more than eventually 30 issues of Transformers material. Because to me, I thought, well, here's this dream job, and it's just been ripped away from me. So for me, probably anything you say is going to be cut from Lost Light. I'll be like, I wish we could have done that.
That makes me sound very brutal.
You can be.
Jack,
I think everyone should agree you can be.
Jack is ending. It's your fault. The early reviews are good.
I mean, that's...
No, don't even know that's not a joke. Look, I walked to your art, alright? Okay, so for all my kind of tendency towards, nailing things down. What I didn't have nailed down at the beginning was who the series villain was going to be. At the very end, whether that was at the end of season 3 or the end of season 4, who were they actually going to have to defeat? And I didn't realise the extent to which all balls were still in the air until I went through the other books and I saw, it was actually Primus, quote unquote, so the kind of not rewind Primus, but the functionist Primus, Unicron, or the Quintessons, and the Quintesson. Because at that point, in 2011, when none of these had been, there'd been no allusion to them in the IDW continuity. In fact, there was a deliberate, kind of editorial diktat. We're not going to do Unicron. And actually, we were never going to do Unicron until the very end, and then we thought, what the hell? But so one of those three was going to be the big bad. The end of Remaining Light, when the portal to Cyber Utopia, allegedly. Skid goes through, Farmer's body ends up in there, and then there are tentacles which sort of pull it in. And that was a kind of Schrodinger's plot point. If it wasn't going to be the Quintessons that were the ultimate baddie, then that would have been the first appearance of them in the story. But if not, it just would have been onions to drag Farmer in. So I kind of the earlier stories I wrote as a fan had the Quintessons as the big bad. And I quite liked Space Pirates. I did like Space Pirates in the UK comic, but Space Pirates was never my favourite story. The Quintessons were never my favourite villains. And I don't know, I think I do like the idea of the Cybertronians going up against, a threat of a similar scale. So, in my mind, the Quintessons would have been colonisers. They would have had, armies of them across the galaxy. So it would have been a proper, evenly matched fight. Unicron, I personally never really wanted Unicron, or never really thought Unicron would be the big bad, because, it's kind of, it has been done. So, we ended up with quote-unquote Primus. There was going to be a fleet. If I'd done Unicron, if we'd done Unicron, there would have been like a fleet of Unicrons, and the idea is there would have been Unicrons created in multiple universes. This is before multiverse became flavoursome chewing gum, which everyone has had a go on. But yeah, it would have been. But it's also, even saying that, it's slightly ludicrous. It's a bit like...
a fleet of Unicrons would have been so much fun to draw.
Yeah, true. But it's a very, very clever, actually, the scale of the threat, because you think, well, one Unicron's back. Wait for it. If you can, imagine many Unicrons.
Yeah, that's one of those instances that I've come across a lot with a writer. We're going to make this epic.
Yeah.
There's a 50,000 strong army.
Yeah.
Go.
Yeah. I mean, it's just balls, just balls. As in balls, that wasn't a criticism. So yeah, I think we got to the right point in the end, but that's that. Okay, so Flame Out. So this is really about how season 4 would have ended. So when time was called, the first to go was all what I consider to be the kind of the inessential stuff. You had to pare it down to the bone, and that really meant respecting respecting the plots that we'd seeded many issues ago, many years ago in some cases, from particularly Run's true nature and the guiding hand. It's really important to me, and it's obvious, but if your whole story is predicated on a quest, then you have to end the quest. It's obvious, but the book can't become something else in its later stages. You have to deliver on that original promise. And so we ended the Knights of Cybertron quest before the finale. We wrapped it up with the Madeira story with You Are Here, and then you just got the threat to deal with. I wanted it to be a kind of universal threat. I felt that the cast deserved it. I felt the book deserved it. We'd always been really lucky to be kind of slightly off stage a little bit, doing our own thing. Even in the later kind of Hasbro mandated crossover stuff, John kind of took on for the team in, and he'd do that, and he'd leave our characters to kind of continue. And part of that was kind of There's plot mechanics, isn't it? You can't have a quest kind of thrusting into the unknown and forever kind of like being boomeranging back to Cybertron. So anyway, but I felt that, I guess selfishly I wanted them. I wanted our kind of motley crew of the various flavours of losers to make a real difference and to save the day. So what that meant is we pared it down to, we've dealt with the Knights of Cybertron. It was really important that actually their broader quest, if you like, or the broader mythology we'd sown throughout the series, which was about the guiding hand, having kind of intentionally kind of damps with the Knights of Cybertron. You know, it's that Cyber Utopia, as imagined, doesn't exist. The Knights of Cybertron were kind of sick immigrants. It was important that there was like, oh, actually, here's the big reveal. You know, these gods, that aren't really gods, but kind of are gods. You've met them. You've met them all along the way without realising it. So that was the framework for the big finale. But one of the gods was, Magnificence was revealed to have been one of the guiding hand. And so there was a lot of story around that to do with the Amiga Guardians. And the Amiga Guardians is a Simon Furman era IDW conceit. And they hadn't played a part in our era of IDW. They do appear in the finale, as you know, and they are a threat, but they are a threat that's quite quickly dealt with. Almost, it's not wholly played for laughs, but it's Nickel, isn't it? Nickel dispatches the Magnificence, and the route into the universe, the Amiga Guardians are going to exploit. That's shut down. So, had we played things out properly, Amiga Guardians would have been a larger threat with more room to breathe and played out over more issues. The reason this is called Flame Out is because, in the, if you like, extended cut of the finale, they would have broken in and, kind of longer story short, Rodimus would have sacrificed himself to end that, to prevent them from breaking into our universe, and he would have saved the day. But critically, he would have sacrificed himself knowing that nobody would know that he'd sacrificed himself. And that was, to me, the natural end point of his character arc. And we do love Rodimus, but his kind of the charisma, the impetuousness, the foolhardiness, the arrogance, all that stuff. And that we played it for laughs most of the time, but he's always very threatened by, whether it's threatened by Megatron, threatened by Thunderclash. He's an insecure kind of guy, and he needs that validation through heroics. And so, to me, the best expression of how he'd grown would have been saving the day. Not just, the irony is when you saved it, but going into that, that fatal encounter, knowing that everyone else will assume it was someone else that had done it, and he didn't care, he still did it. So that was so I guess I regret that element of the story the most that we had. It was just space. Crucible is 6 issues. We had a coda. A couple more we could have done it, but that was tough.
So how far? Because I've forgotten so much. How far before the end would that have taken place? How much would have had to have happened after that?
Yeah, we probably would have needed 8 issues, and the first couple of issues of Crucible would have been as they are. But so the Amiga Guardians would have. It's like that thing where you think you've dealt with the main threat, and then there's a bigger one. So in the last 3 issues of the expanded Crucible, the Amiga Guardians would have started to come through. This is a horrible plug. It's not meant to be as blatant as this, but it is. The more details are in the notebooks, you'd expect. There's stuff in there. But we could have. It wasn't one of those things where I didn't see this idea 2 years ago, therefore it's not doable. It could have. It was doable. It was just
that is actually, because that would have been awful. It would have been heartbreaking
and dying.
That feels like maybe that's a loss. That would have been powerful, I think.
Yeah. So that's, I think chapter 10 is our last one actually. There's time for some questions at the end. The only thing I remember to say is at issue 25 of my slide, where we set up the split, and you've got the other crew sort of forging ahead into the unknown. And we did have I did have a few things in there. I debated how much to give readers a sense of what their purpose would be, whether they'd even have a purpose. As you know, we ended it with just intentionally open canvas and a doodle one. But there was one stage, as written in the script, had them kind of on a quest for Rung, but not fully knowing that's what they were, because you don't, because he's kind of been removed, but there's something which compels them. It would be that they were looking for a key. It would have been the only thing left in Rung's quarters amongst the dust and the matrices would have been a key. And it's kind of almost deliberately hackneyed. It's a MacGuffin, but it just would have. That was the way in which Rung's legacy would have been kind of, as it is. And I had a question. The person might be in the room now, but I had a question yesterday about in issue 25 when. Well, that's the other thing, of course. They didn't find Cyber Utopia. They created Cyber Utopia. They brought it into our universe. But with the Please Remember Me and all those sparks, the hotspots that are created, and that generation, that new generation of robots, all bore a physical resemblance to Rung. So that actually, in the end, that was his echo. And we didn't need the quest, we didn't need the key, but that was the plan.
And this is just something I'm interested in. What do you, the feedback that you get from the readers on the ending, is it, do you find that they perceive it as a happy ending, or a sad ending, or somewhere in between?
Of the two, I guess the two futures.
No, that's the thing. Because let me frame this correctly.
This is Paxman-esque, go on.
Yeah, people say to me that it's a sad ending, it's a devastating ending, and it's just heartbreaking. And I always think, but it's not though, because I'm with that other crew. Where are you? That's what I'm asking. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I do. And I was going to say, of the two futures, if you like, let's call it the funeral future, which starts with Ratchet's demise. People do find that, generally people find that really, that's a real downer.
It is, absolutely, it is.
And I'm mixed on that. I mean, I guess you could say it's real because it's not all shiny and everything's tied up neatly. You've got a counterbalance. You've got Cyclonus and Tail getting well, reaching an accommodation. Rung has gone through the ringer. The idea, by the way, of that was that what are they without the quest? What are they without? Well, what are they without each other? Is the better way of putting it. And once you remove the lost light and you remove the conceit, what is the thing that keeps them together? It's the spaceship, isn't it? And the quest. You know what I mean? So once that's gone and they can do what they want and they dissipate, and then some of them do suffer, and Rodimus suffers, because he lacks purpose, and he lacks whatever it is that the crew gave him, which we were starting to recognise in Crucible. And the world goes on a bit of a spree, not killing, but petty crime. And so we get to have a little bit of a grace note for World, and that is because he rejects the hands, which actually left him, and he's welcomed into the kind of the bosom of Cyclonus and Town. So it's a bittersweet ending, Not I think Nautica's all right. Swerve's tried to make a go of it, and that's failed. I mean, it's mixed. The alternate future, or the duplicate future, is uncomplicatedly optimistic. I mean, that is.
Yeah, and that's the one that I fixate on, and not everyone does. That's kind of my. For a lot of people, from what I hear from a lot of people, is that they kind of discard that positive future and just fixate on.
I wonder whether there's, maybe some kind of subconscious. You're privileging the mixed bag future because that's the real one, and the other one is kind of because maybe they decided the other one's a duplicate. We don't actually say which is the duplicate. Anyway, I'm just thinking there's probably not much time left. Should we do some? If there's any questions, that's right. For Jack as well, because
There's. Well, let's go here with the mask.
We probably only got time for like 2 questions.
Okay.
Oh my god, right.
We're side by side, Jack, aren't we? On the
on the wall under there.
Yeah?
That's all.
Hiya, so I'm extremely intrigued by what you mentioned in the notebooks about the possibility of what would happen if Drift was saved as like the proto-getaway figure in More PCI/Offline. So if you could speak to that at all, that would be amazing, thank you.
Yeah, okay. So is this the Drift? Did you mention Drift, or am I?
Yeah, drift.
Yeah, that's right. So it's very, very quickly. So I knew this would have been right. Getaway as a villainous character really came into his own once we knew that Megatron was going to be on the board, and we needed to kind of reflect some readers' response back at them and legitimise it by saying, you know what, you're right. Actually, you've got this genocidal war criminal on board. Some people are going to be really unhappy, and you filtered that through Getaway, and yeah, he's a pattern. But prior to Megatron coming, I did like the idea of there being a crew member that you'd come to like who actually was, you know. I didn't get to the point of crafting what act of villainy would have crossed it over the line, but Drift was a candidate for that. So and I think it's just one of those things that I could already see it being squeezed out. The news that the decision that Megatron would become an Autobot, that was when I was writing Shadow Play, so it was issue 9, so it was quite early on, you know, so never really needed to develop the Drift. And actually Drift was exiled from the ship because he was needed in a miniseries, wasn't he? And then Ratchet for the same. Well, no, Ratchet was taken off because of the miniseries, and Drift because we needed the consequence of Overlord being released and Optimus needed Patsy. So sorry, that's a quick answer. Is there one more question? Did you say?
Yeah, probably
sorry.
more down here.
I feel bad now. I should have stopped talking like half an hour ago.
I just have a question for both of you. Because you are like really incredible artists and writers. What's your biggest advice to aspiring writers and artists?
Biggest advice is to work without having a publisher, you know, not signed to a publisher, but just work and practice in whatever you're wanting to go into, and then put that work in front of people and use social media to, you know, if you want to be a comic artist, draw comics and put them online for people to critique or enjoy or whatever, and draw. Just are you going through art education? Yeah. Okay, so I'm only going to be telling you what your art teachers or tutors will be telling you. Just practice and don't stop. Draw every day. Don't stop.
Right, thank you very much. Unfortunately, we're out of time, so thank you again to Jack and James.